Now, Nikki Haley, I was watching her on stage, and she very much I felt like was aiming towards the moderates, and that's some of what I've heard this morning from some of the analysis after the fact. Is she, we have some of these candidates up here very taking very right wing approaches to some of the policies that they want to bring forward. But even when we talked about abortion on stage, Nikki Haley is saying, this is where I stand, but I don't think we should be, um, arresting women for getting abortions or giving like the death sentence or anything like that. I think she kind of was trying to appeal to far more than just, Republican voters. What do you think that approach was, and do you think it paid off for her?
Yeah, I don't recall her saying. I obviously can't remember everything that the candidates were saying last night, but I don't remember saying anything about women getting arrested for abortions. The person having an abortion, usually the law deals with physicians if they are performing an abortion without the proper procedures and information provided and things of that nature ahead of time. But what she was saying in terms of that practical approach is that you had somebody, I think in one exchange, it was Pence that was saying, hey, 70% of the American electorate wants to have a 15-week limitation on abortions. And Haley's response was saying, was that, well, 70% of the Senate isn't going to vote for that. Now, her point was, again, a very practical point, is that to get legislation through, although this could change, you still need to have that 60 votes to end the debate. That's what's called cloture. And if you don't have 60 senators out of the 100 that are willing to vote for it, it's not going to happen. And that's what she says, is that right now you have even less than a majority of senators currently in the Senate that controlled by Democrats by a very slim margin, of course, but still, that as long as if you don't even have a majority, you aren't going to get any legislation through that requires 15 weeks, because certainly Democrats aren't going to support it, and even some Republicans won't. And that's the practical aspect. So why run on that particular thing? Well, it's a principled manner. You could say, well, we still want to run on that, even if we aren't going to be able to get it through, because sometimes what happens is that you put legislators on the spot by saying, okay, we're going to pass this or we're going to put it up for a vote, and then you have to go on the record. And that sometimes will cause legislators to change their thinking or change what they're going to do if all of a sudden they have to go on the record for something, or they try to avoid that. So again, it's that political game that a lot of folks don't like. In terms of Haley sort of appealing more to the moderates, toward the independents, of course, and it's the independents, whether it's in Iowa in particular or just nationwide, it's usually the independents that will decide elections. Because normally in most states, Democrats and Republicans are sufficiently evenly split. So it's all those people in the middle usually that decide whether a state's going to go one way or another way. And if that's the case, you don't want to take a position that's too extreme. Well, we know that from decades and decades of political science research, is that for the Republicans, you run to the right; for Democrats, you run to the left in the primaries, and then run to the center for the general election. Well, you can't do that quite as much as politicians of old could. That before you had the internet and even cable television and things of that nature, when you back in the days, for those of us old enough to remember, three networks, basically, even before Fox came on the scene, that you only got a small bit of news on three networks, and then, of course, your newspapers and radio as well. And so it was much more limited. And so it was easier for candidates to kind of play to their base, whether it was to the right or to the left, and move back into the center for the general election. And you just can't do that quite as much these days. And plus, when you have a situation like this where you have a debate, even though it's the primary and well before even the Iowa caucuses, which are the first contest, a lot of independent voters are looking at this and they're saying, well, who do we want? Who are these people? Especially if they aren't familiar with a lot of the lesser known candidates, whoever they happen to be. And if all of a sudden they're seeing, again, since it's a Republican debate, if they're seeing what they think are very extreme positions, that maybe they'd be happy with 15 weeks, but not so much with 6 weeks. And they see all the candidates saying, yeah, we want to have 6 weeks and we want to make it a national law, national requirement, as opposed to state by state, that it can turn those folks off before you even get to the general election. So that's, I think, partly what Haley was sort of shooting for, is the idea is let's moderate this a little bit. Let's be practical about what's going to appeal to people, because we need to win a general election. And for some of the people on the stage, what Ramaswamy often referred to as the professional politicians, they're basically looking at it in terms of the ultimate goal here for the Republican Party is to win in the general election. And hopefully they can select the person that they believe has the best chance of doing so, whether it's Trump or somebody else.